Whatever happened to diplomacy? You know, I used to study, not too much, diplomacy. I said, whatever happened to getting everything you want? Now, some you have to be rough, some you have to be nice, but whatever happened? And let me tell you, if I did go up and start screaming, they would have said, he was terrible. He was so rude. It was horrible. His performance was horrible. Whatever happened to fair press? Whatever happened to honest reporting? I remember a nice man, I actually like him, he's very talented, with the big chart. And all that red, it started getting red, Republican. I started getting red, that chart, red, red, red. Your little tiny dot of blue along the ocean. His hand starts shaking. Oh, look. Oh my God, another state came. Oh my God, what's going on? Fake news. So Bob Casey doesn't mind MS-13 coming in. These are the slicers. They slice people up. They wanted me to walk up and go like this.
Some of the president at his rally last night in Pennsylvania, and there was much, much more of that. Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, August 3rd. Welcome to Morning Joe. We have a number of important developments to get through this morning, including a stark warning from the intel community. Russia is at it again. They've got the public's attention, but what about the president's? Does he care? What's going on? Plus, Dan Coats speaks truth to power. Again, the director of national intelligence admits he still does not know what the president told Vladimir Putin last month in Helsinki. Think about it, the director of national intelligence. And Ivanka Trump says that it was a low point for her when the separations of children from their family were happening under her father's administration through her father's policy. She says it was a low point. She felt bad about it. The big question is, will she do anything about it besides prepared comments? With us, we have national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, John Heilemann. Donnie's here. Donnie Deutsch is here. Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst Susan Del Percio is here. Columnist and associate editor for the Washington Post, David Ignatius. And Pulitzer Prize-winning historian John Meacham, author of The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels, a battle that we're in right now, for sure. Joe will be back on Monday. Willie, what did you think of the president last night? What was just your gut watching him?
I thought two things. I thought, first of all, it was extraordinary that a couple of hours after his entire national security apparatus appeared in the White House briefing room laying out chapter and verse how Russia continues to interfere in our elections, that the president then went out at that rally and called it a Russian hoax.
Yep.
And reportedly, he sent those people out as director of national intelligence and the FBI director. I also just thought it was sort of another pathetic grievance session, airing his grievances, talking about how unfairly he's treated by the press. And I wondered what it would be like if he spent the time and energy he spends on that, focusing on things like clean water in Flint or visiting troops in a war zone, for example. It just strikes me as a monumental waste of time for a president of the United States to go on and on and on one or two subjects that he can't get past.
And hammering the media. John Heilemann, your thoughts watching this rally last night as it pertains to all the rallies we've seen. But what are you thinking at this point, watching this man?
You know, I'm thinking it's getting old.
Yeah.
You know, the things that he's talking about are really beyond. I agree with everything Willie said, and there are things that are disturbing, especially about the relationship, about the fact that he continues to, in various ways, implicitly and sometimes explicitly, knock down his intelligence chiefs, who he supposedly yesterday sent out. The reporting was, I want those 5 people to go out there and make this case for me. They're going to make the case. I ordered them to go out there and make it, and then he goes on the stage and basically undercuts them. But as a political story, right, this is just, it's not just red meat, it's red raw meat for a for the 35% that is the core Trump base. He's in a state where he's got a Senate candidate who's trailing He's not in a super strong position, is not going to win Pennsylvania by appealing to that 35%. He's got to be talking about other things. But what's he not talking about? He's not talking about the economy. He's not talking about any things that actually matter to the Pennsylvania voters who are going to determine that election. And so, great to rev up the base. He's very good at that. He's proven that over and over again. But this message and the grievance fest that it is does nothing to expand the voter pool that's going to be drawn on by Lou Barletta or by candidates across the country.
So
Republican candidates.
And there's a reason I'm asking. I'm going to go completely around the table, rapid fire here. David Ignatius will take you next. Especially specifically on the media and on Russia. Your take on the president last night.
Well, it's as if we have two governments. One government that states responsible policies drawn from what our intelligence agencies have discovered, issuing warnings to state governments, doing the business of government. And then we have this other government, this other ring in our national circus in which the president conducts a daily anti-elitist rant. The principal targets are people in the media. I hate to say it, but we're the best thing he's got going for him. He doesn't have a lot of other issues besides rousing the public to think that we are in some way elitist, to use his phrase, enemies. But he's making us the central theme of his campaign. We just have to see that right in the eyes. So, but it is as if, Mika, they're two separate rings to this circus now.
Yeah, and it seems like some people are beginning to really understand that, especially, and he was going after generals last night. John Meacham, is there anybody in history, a figure in history, that parallels what's happening with this president?
I think it's Joe McCarthy. Yeah, I think this is as if McCarthy had become president, to go to John's point about it getting old. Roy Cohn, who was both Joe McCarthy's counsel and Donald Trump's. So sometimes you don't have to make this stuff up. You know, it just falls in your lap. Cohn wrote a book in 1968 about Joe McCarthy, in which he said that basically McCarthy had bought anti-communism the way other people buy a used car. That it was just a vehicle to take over the American politics, and particularly in the right wing. And secondly, people got tired of the show. They got tired of having, as FDR once said, the highest note in the scale repeated again and again.
Susan Del Percio, and then Donnie. What's your gut?
Well, the first thing I thought of it, listening again to all his falsehoods, is, wow, this is really why his attorneys, President Trump's attorneys, do not want him to go in front of Robert Mueller.
Right.
Because he just gets all revved up, and he simply cannot tell the truth. And yes, it's getting old, but thank goodness people are still speaking up and trying to, speak out against it. But boy, is he in trouble if he goes in front of Mueller.
Donnie.
The saddest and most frightening thing to me when Trump is at these rallies is actually not Trump himself. It's the people. There was an amazing statistic.
Well, people are excited to meet the president of the United States.
Well, it's not just yes, excited is a nice word, but the rigor with which they accept his information. CBS News had an amazing poll that was stunning, that of people who define themselves as strong Trump supporters, 90% of people who say their information they get from Trump they believe is accurate.
Right.
Where 60% they get from their friends or family they believe is accurate, and 10% from the media. Let's think about it again. Those people in that audience, because we're going to have to describe them as strong Trump supporters, if their friend or family member told them something, they're less likely to believe it. Than that goofball up there, than crazy Uncle Donnie. And going back to the two governments that David brought up, we have crazy Uncle Donnie. There's the government that exists, and we now have this figure that we continue to have completely unaccountable to even his own staff. It doesn't, and there's no repercussion. So we will talk this day to day and say Dan Coates and Chris Wray and John Bolton came out and said this is a fact, it was a fact, and is a fact, and then their boss gets up on stage and says it's not. So we've got crazy Uncle Donnie talking to his base that stunningly, regardless of what he says, will continue to go, but the voters will speak in November.
They will.
And that 34%. Yes, a lot of them vote in the primary, but there will be a wave the likes of which we've never seen before.
So my take is this. It's blunt, fair to say, but I've been there before, and I did it when it wasn't cool to do. And I'm going to do it again. He's not well. That's the bottom line. There's no way anyone who knows Donald Trump but is not bought in some way could watch him last night and not come away with a feeling that the President of the United States is completely unhinged and getting worse by the day. Perhaps the stress is really squeezing in on him. It's interesting that a former reality TV star and colleague of Trump is releasing a book with the title Unhinged. And this is a woman who knew him during his reality show days very well and then went with him to the White House. And in it, she describes a reaction to a man that she had known for over a decade who is in a state of mental decline. It's a concern that we've voiced on this show during the campaign and over the last tumultuous 18 months. Try and find someone who's not politically invested or too fearful of Donald Trump or the Republican Party, who knew the man a decade ago, who will tell you that his mental state has not deteriorated radically over the past few years or changed or come out in some way. It is transforming what we're watching. You will not find that person from Donald Trump's past if they're telling you the truth. We were told of his unfitness for office by those closest to him on the campaign, and we saw it ourselves up close in the December 2015 interview in which he first pledged his fealty to Vladimir Putin. Now, let me tell you, you can pull that interview up, and it's a little embarrassing, but I will say you can see in our faces in real time us kind of going from jovial and fun to sitting up and listening to him and realizing this guy's not right. And this is bad what's happening here. And we showed you this person throughout the campaign, and we pointed out those issues. You listened to him talk about Russia during the campaign on this show. We were told repeatedly that it was somehow out of bounds to comment on the candidate's declining mental state. And yes, I'm not a doctor, but I know what I see, and we know Donald Trump. We also know what campaign staffers told us 2 years ago, and I know that the dangerous, blustering bigot on the stage last night is even more boorish and less connected to reality than he was 10 years ago. Donald Trump is not well, and everyone close to him says it. They're all scared of what he's going to say or tweet next. His Republican dupes know it, and yet no one, seemingly, will do anything about it. Not the people who can. Same as it ever was, but much more precarious right now for the media, the press, far more dangerous for our democracy.
Mika, I just want to jump on that for a second. It's interesting because that popped back in my head last night also. And I, a few months ago, watched an hour-long interview I did with him in 2007. His cadence, his eyes, he was a different guy. And I would ask everybody to go and look at some old interviews with Donald Trump. He's not just younger. His entire mannerisms, his entire way of speaking is different. So I'm glad you re-brought that up because it's easy. We all kicked that around for a long time.
Watch our reaction.
And then it became
the
kind of the norm.
turns.
But yeah,
the worm
he
turns.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that is an ongoing, I think at this point almost a given when you watch this man's behavior.
All right. Well, that is where we're at. Got a sense from everybody, state of mind watching that rally last night. And with that, we go to...
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.